Good morning, everybody. You are listening to K-Talk Radio 1640 AM. This is the show, Utah Home Sweet Home. And I am your host, Yoshi Shiraki, and today our very special guest is Jeff Brailio.
How you doing, Yoshi?
I'm good, buddy. You?
Great.
Good. Well, I'm excited for the show. We're actually going to be hearing, I think you called it, War Stories from the Courtroom.
Or stories from the war room.
Stories from the war room. Okay.
Stories from the legal war room.
Legal war room. I mean, you know, I've since I was little, I've always been fascinated with law for some reason. I probably should have gone and studied law. I didn't, but you know, you. Now that I'm older, I'm even more fascinated as I see these legal cases that will take place. You know, you can actually go read all about it, and in certain there's, I don't even remember what it's called, but I remember being introduced to a place that you can go and download legal cases and then kind of get the gist of the case. And I thought, wow, that's, you know, and I get fascinated diving in there and reading and seeing.
Yeah, you can find everything online now. It's actually very easy to find. You can actually look up Google things like cool cases or weird cases.
Interesting.
And, there's plenty of websites with weird legal stuff out there. So you can spend all day wasting time.
Yeah, exactly.
You can do celebrity cases where celebrities have been sued or sports stars have been sued and find those cases.
Interesting. Never thought of that. So I love hearing about this stuff because usually there's a lesson to be learned. You know, sometimes if you rewind, it could have been avoidable, but it wasn't for whatever reason and happened. And so they're fascinating to me. And the lessons that I can pick up from it, and not necessarily saying we're going to dissect what the lesson is today, but for all of you listening, you can figure out what the lesson is for you. So I'm excited to dive into this, Jeff. You've got some stories for us.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's start with a couple that were retail sales.
Okay.
Now both these projects, both these cases were essentially investor projects.
Got it.
Where they were rehabbed.
Okay.
So they were fix and flip projects.
Okay.
But this was in problems that arose in the post-rehab sale to a retail client.
Gotcha.
And having to do with condition of the house. And inspections and things of that nature.
Got it.
So this really applies to anybody selling a house.
Yeah.
And so the first one, this is a fun one, because you'll know one of the contractors involved.
Okay.
I had a client, so he had a flip project and renovated the house.
Okay.
I was up in Ogden.
Okay.
And it was pretty good remodel. It was the first time he had used a certain set of guys for the work.
Sure, okay.
And the quality wasn't really up to his standards, his normal standards. He's a really experienced investor, does a lot of flips, does really good jobs.
Got it.
This one he knew there was some issues, just little things that just weren't quite done perfectly.
Sure.
So anyways, he lists it on the multiple listing service. He has an agent. Excels on a retail transaction. The buyer also had an agent representing them. That's really kind of important.
Yeah.
In both these cases, there was an agent involved.
Gotcha.
And we'll talk about some of the issues that you can have with agents.
Okay.
But his buyer was a young woman in her 20s. This was her first home.
Okay.
And she bought the house and then moved in. And she found a couple of these little things, like some maybe cracked tile in the bathroom in a corner, that sort of thing. And so she came back to him with a kind of a list of repairs. He said, "Hey, no problem. You know, these things need to be done." So he started to do the list, and then she said, "Well, I also found a leak in the roof." Okay. Which is obviously, I mean, that's a much bigger deal than some cracked tile.
Yeah. And this is still due diligence time, right?
No, this is after. So she
so she's already moved. I thought you said that, but I was just double
she
checking.
already had the inspections.
Okay.
She already closed. She bought the house. She moved in.
Got it.
Because these little things weren't anything that an inspector would pick out.
Yeah.
You know, the inspector didn't find the problem with the roof.
Yeah.
And the inspector's not going to say, "Hey, there's a little cracked tile here," or this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so when she moved in, that's when she kind of found the little things. But the leak in the roof was a section between the kitchen and an extension off the back.
Okay.
Where probably a porch. This is before my client even bought the house, so he didn't do this addition to the home.
Got it.
And it's very common in town for people to take their back porches, frame them in, roof them, and turn it into living space.
Right.
But then you got this sort of roofing of the roof itself, and then sort of a new roof on the porch or where the deck was for the new addition.
Right.
And so they don't really line up really well.
Yes.
So anyways, there's a little bit of leak. He said, hey, no problem. Yeah, I can see that. There'll be a leak. I'll have my roofer come out and fix it.
Yeah.
And so he sends the roofer out. And you know the roofer.
Okay.
It's our favorite roofer of all time.
Yes.
We could plug him maybe later in the show.
Yeah.
Give out his number. So he goes back and, and he did some patch jobs on the roof. That's why he was called back.
Got it.
And he's like, yeah, I'll go take a look at it. We'll make sure it's fine.
Yeah.
When he shows up, the mother of the buyer is up on the roof.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And she's up there stomping her foot all over the roof.
Oh my gosh.
Because she said she got up there to kind of, to see what was going on, even though my client, the seller in the transaction, had sent his roofer to fix the problem.
Yes.
Her mother gets up on the roof and she starts feeling a soft spot, and she literally pounds with her foot on the soft spot and puts her foot through the roof.
Oh my gosh.
Rick, I just said the name of the roofer. The roofer is literally standing on the sidewalk going, what are you doing?
Yes.
You can get up on any roof, and if you push hard enough, you're going to break something.
Yeah.
So, and at that point, the mother now gets involved. And the mother, it's mama bear syndrome.
Yeah.
This is her daughter's first house.
Right.
And so she's super concerned, and she's like, we want a whole new roof. And now you're talking from if the roofer had missed something, he probably would have fixed it for free, to maybe a couple $100.
Right.
And in fact, the original repair is only probably $50.
Got it.
Now there's a hole in the roof.
Yes.
And you need the press board underneath, and the roofing material, and the shingles.
Yes.
And for that, it was going to be $700, just that.
Oh, jeez.
And my client actually has to find, we'll fix that soft spot, and get a little repair at $700, no problem, we'll do it. And the mother refused. She goes, no, we want a whole new roof. We want the whole roof replaced.
Wow.
And we're like, no. We're not replacing the whole roof because you got up there and pushed your foot through the boards. And they refused to settle at that. They refused to have just the hole fixed and the other minor repair. They got one lawyer.
Yeah.
And I explained the situation, and went kind of back and forth, and he was arguing that they wanted a new roof and deserved a new roof, and I said no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Utah is and this is kind of, here's some lessons.
Yeah.
Utah is a buyer beware state.
Gotcha.
I mean, that's the way to define it. We don't call ourselves a buyer beware state.
Sure.
But legally, the way real estate transactions are structured here.
Yes.
The MLS listings, as you know, at the bottom says, buyer to verify all information. In fact, I got a couple of these.
Got it.
So on the multiple listing service, it says that this is informational, and the buyers to everything. The purchase contract, the Utah real estate purchase contract, also obligates the buyers to do their own inspections.
Yeah.
It gives buyers inspection periods wherein they can cancel the contract if there's something they don't like.
Yeah. Very flexible for a buyer.
Yeah, totally flexible. Because again, if the buyer proceeds and actually buys the house, that's it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
That's why we're so flexible with buyers in the due diligence period.
Right.
Because once they buy it, they've bought the house.
Yes.
And, it's your job to do it as a buyer, your job to do inspections, to ask for repairs.
Get a roofer there to check the roof if you want.
Check it right.
Yeah.
And they had an inspection.
Yeah.
And the inspector didn't come up with this. And again,
yeah.
On older homes, you're going to find soft spots.
Oh, yeah.
They're totally fine. They're going to keep out the water. They'll probably last for decades.
Yes.
But if you put your foot on it,
exactly.
stomp on it, it's going to open a hole. So anyways, this one attorney, I kind of, I said, look, there's no way.
Yeah.
So you can just forget it.
Yeah.
If you want to go to court, that's fine. We are not putting on a whole new roof, when she caused the damage in the first place.
Right.
We're happy to repair it.
Yeah.
It's going to be $700, but we'll eat that. Because my client's a good investor, right?
Yeah.
So he has a reputation.
Yeah.
And then we didn't hear anything for weeks and weeks, and then that attorney dropped the clients.
Oh.
Yeah. And one of the things I had argued and here's where agents come in, I said, look, and now I started talking directly with the mom.
Okay.
And I said, you hired a real estate agent.
Yeah.
And you hired a licensed inspector.
Yeah.
If you have a problem with the inspection condition of the house, you need to go after your agent and your inspector.
Right.
But I can tell you, this isn't from a practical matter, I can absolutely tell you that agents will just walk away from, they'll just, oh no, this isn't, you need to, they'll blame everybody under the sun.
Sure.
I mean, this is a real estate program, I hate to disparage all the real estate agents, but in my experience, 80% of the real estate agents out there are grossly incompetent.
Right.
They can get the bare things done, and if everything goes according to plan, there's never a problem, and that's why there's so many of those agents out there. But when the rubber meets the road, so to say, the agents are very inexperienced and incompetent.
Right.
And they never take responsibility for things because they don't really realize that agents, they get into that world like, hey, I can help my friends buy a house and I can make money.
Yeah.
Not really understanding that these are hundreds of thousands of dollar assets that people are buying and live in, and there's a lot of details.
Right.
So tip number one, find and work with a highly experienced and competent real estate agent like Yoshi Shiraki.
Oh, thank you.
I was going to make sure you plug me on your show, so I'm going to start plugging you.
Well, thank you.
Because it does matter.
Right.
Experience matters. Don't hire your neighbor because they just got their real estate license.
Right. That's true.
Okay. So the mother refused to settle. She refused to listen. And I said, look, she says, we want to go to arbitration. Which is actually the next step, and that's something you need to decide when you are a buyer.
Got it.
And you're looking at the purchase contract. There's a section. It's the arbitration clause.
Yeah.
And you know this one, Yoshi. And there's 2 boxes that you can check.
Right.
In the event of this dispute, the parties will go to arbitration first.
Or shall.
Or may.
Or may,
They shall or they may.
Yes, exactly.
Right? If you check the shall box, that means you have to go to a mediator first before you can actually file a case in court.
Right.
If you check the may box, you have the option.
Right.
And the difference, how they play out, is if you go to arbitration under the Utah REPC, then each side pays its own costs.
Gotcha.
So we had checked the shall box. We had to go to mediation before they could sue.
Gotcha.
Which meant my client was now going to spend legal fees and defense fees going to arbitration, and plus the costs of the arbiter.
Gotcha.
Because they cost money.
Yeah.
Just to prove his point that he wasn't responsible for replacing the entire roof.
Right.
And so we went to arbitration, and they started and they put us both in the same room, and we were pretty adamant. We said, no, we're not replacing the whole roof. So that's not even a starting point. Yeah. And the arbiter could see that we couldn't negotiate, so he separated us, put us in separate rooms.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
And so in our room, I basically told him the whole story, what happened. The mother's the one that put her foot through the roof. We were still in repair. We're still going to give him the $700 to repair the actual damage. Right. Not the whole roof.
Right.
And we weren't budging from that. Yeah. And he came back, well, what about, a little bit more? No. Yeah. No, this is absurd. And, and the arbiter knew. Yeah. And he finally came back and said, okay, they'll agree to the $700.
Got it.
So when my client paid the $700 and had it repaired. Yes. But he had about another $700 in fees for the arbiter and me. Yeah. And I gave him really reduced costs. I just kind of showed up and talked to the arbiter is all I really did. Got it. But still, an arbiter is they'll be $400 or $500 an hour. Woo. And that was split between the 2 parties, and it was probably 3 hours. Wow. In there. Wow. Or close to that. Got it. And so it took some time, and we won. Yes. But the lesson is get a good inspector, hire a qualified agent. Yeah. Understand that as a buyer, once you buy that house, you've bought all the problems with it. Yep. There's only one thing that survives closing before we get on to the next example. Oh. I'm almost ready for a commercial. So, what was I going to say? There was
one thing that survives closing.
Oh, the one thing that survives closing is if there's a problem with the house. Yeah. And you're thinking about suing the seller, going after the seller for damages or to repair costs. Yeah. The only thing that really survives closing is a material defect. That means there's something wrong with the house that really harms the value or function of the house. It has to be, material is a legal word that means it's significant.
Got it.
So a significant defect that you find in a house, that the seller already knew about.
Oh, okay.
And the seller didn't disclose it.
Ah, gotcha.
So if the seller knows about something, doesn't disclose it, and it's not something that would be found on a regular inspection, the seller can still be liable.
Right.
So sellers can be liable for conditions of the house if they. And this really is covering the situation where the seller's hiding something, like intentionally hiding something.
That makes sense.
And so, but other than that, when you buy a house, you basically bought the house.
Gotcha. In this particular case, just out of curiosity, did this investor have Rick, his roofer, go and do it, or did they want their own roofer to do it?
I think that we gave them the cash at that point because we didn't want any further connection.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
At that point, if my memory serves, we just gave them wrote a check for $700 for them to, and then I think they could do with the $700 whatever they wanted.
Right.
If they wanted to apply that towards repairing, replacing the whole roof.
Gotcha.
They could. So that's what happened.
Okay, perfect. Then my curiosity was because of that, because like if there was further roof problems, you'd be like, well, dude, you have the money, you hired that roofer, go after that roofer now. And
one thing, if you are selling a house, right, and a lot of sellers will do this. Like after closing, the buyers move and they find little things.
Sure.
And they all come back to sellers. They don't go to their agent and say, what do I do? And the agent should say, sorry, you really can't go after the seller for that.
Right.
Because it was my job.
Yeah.
My job and the inspector's job to tell you these things.
Exactly.
And we blew it.
Right.
So they say, oh yeah, you got to go after the sellers.
Yeah.
That's an agent's standard response.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to take responsibility.
Of course. Yeah.
And so, hire really good agents, hire really good inspectors, know what you're doing.
Yeah. And then the tricky thing with a lot of agents is they're the ones that recommended the inspector. So now, they can't say, go after the inspector.
If you're an agent, give a list of at least 3 inspectors and let your buyer decide who to hire.
Right. Very good. Awesome. Well, that's a great story. We are going to take a quick commercial break. We've got more of those stories when we come back, so stay tuned, and we will be right back.
Did you know the Snappers is the most convenient lease?
Yeah. Did you know that story?
I did.
Okay. The next one's actually going to be Matt's. It's another sort of post-flip retail sale with problems and stuff. So I think it's good because you've got clients. Most listeners are probably more retail.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll start with that for the next one.
Easily and conveniently
I have a friend. We have a friend Riley. Remember when he closed off a room? Do you remember? Like he finished a basement and there was a room, but he was like, I don't know why, but he just like, I'm not gonna have access to it, and just closed it off. And then the buyers moved in and then somehow found out there was a room behind a wall. And they said, well, if he hid that, then what else is hidden?
Yeah.
I don't know what ended up happening.
Yeah, Matt had one like that too.
Oh, really?
He didn't. The previous owners put drywall in the basement, which he didn't remove. He just painted over.
Yeah.
But when the new buyers removed the drywall, there was a crack in the foundation. So they claimed that Matt had covered it up, which he didn't, but it looked like he had.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah, and now I do. I'm going to put Riley's. I remember Riley's room one too. I'm going to write that one down for future reference.
I want to hear it.
All right, guys, we are back. This is K-Talk Radio, 1640 AM. This is the show Utah Home Sweet Home. We are listening to war stories, legal war stories. And if you're just tuning in, you really missed a phenomenal story, good learning experience. If you're a buyer, if you're a seller, any way you look at it, there was definitely a lot of lessons to be learned. Definitely go to UtahHomeSweetHome.com, our website, scroll down to the bottom, click on the YouTube link. We post all our shows there, so you'll be able to rewatch or re-listen to this show if you've missed it. So, Jeff, thank you. We are back, and we've got some more stories now.
We got more stories. Yeah, so this one is a similar kind of setup.
Okay.
So this is a good story for retail buyers, retail sellers, agents, kind of a general real estate population. This was an investor post-rehab flip, but it really had nothing to do with the house itself.
Gotcha.
So the client listed the house on the multiple listing service, MLS.
Okay.
It was a flag lot, which is an unusual lot kind of to begin with. But the problem came down to a boundary line issue. And boundary lines kind of generally are huge. They're probably throughout the United States, I would have to imagine.
Yeah.
It's particularly, but and I don't work in other states, but I do know Utah really, really well.
Yeah.
And you're going to find boundary line problems everywhere. Because what happens is, there's the legal description of the property, the legal boundaries that are done by surveyors and the little, cameras and whatnot.
Yes.
But then over time, people put up fences or hedges or other structures on the property.
Right.
And their fences almost certainly do not line up with the actual boundary line, the legal line of description.
Right.
And so, it's very common when you buy a house and you get to title.
Yeah.
And what you receive is called the property report,
yes.
or title commitment. And on that property report, it lists things about the house like liens and stuff like that.
Right.
But what you also get is a survey map, a plat map.
Yes.
Nobody looks at the plat map. They don't.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many clients say, read your plat maps, look at the plat maps, and take it out to the property and start examining it, because the plat map will they can be tough to read, but they will show you the legal boundaries.
Got it.
And and it does have some measurements depending on how good the plat map is.
Gotcha.
And you may be able to look at that map and then look at where fences are, hedges, and driveways. I mean, I've been cases where people have actually poured concrete driveways.
Yes.
And encroached on their neighbor's property line.
Wow.
And then neighbors come back and say, no, you've got to cut out your driveway.
Yeah.
So boundary line and boundary line disputes are rampant.
Wow.
Most people just sort of ignore them.
Yeah.
And there is something in Utah called the boundary acquiescence doctrine.
Gotcha.
Which means if somebody puts up a fence or a hedge or a building or structure or something that either goes over the boundary line of the neighbors or even is inside.
Yeah.
And after 20 years, if nobody really challenges that as the actual boundary between the two lots, that fence then becomes the actual legal boundary.
Wow.
And you've either lost land or gained land, depending.
Dude, how did they prove 20 years though?
It's tough. It is a fact-based analysis. You have to, if you can
show a
like
receipt,
Google photos, testimony from neighbors of how long the fence has been there, things of that nature. Maybe old photos of the people that lived there before, parties in the backyard, whatever.
Sure.
So it is real, and that's why usually people just ignore this.
Mm-hmm.
But on occasion, you get someone who buys a house and goes, "Guess what, neighbor? Your fence is on my land. You have to move your fence."
Got it.
And they can make you move that fence.
Oh, wow.
If you can't prove that it's been about the new boundary by acquiescence.
Oh my gosh.
And if it's something you just put up, you are taking that fence down. And it happens a lot.
Wow.
It happens a lot where people have to remove fences, remove garages, break up concrete, because what they thought was their land really wasn't.
Got it.
I always recommend, if there's any situation where you think the boundary line or fencing or something might be an issue, might be an issue, get a surveyor out there.
Got it.
Pay the extra, have a survey, and actually, because a property inspector is not going to do a boundary line survey. Right. So you need somebody else to actually do the survey and tell you where, and they'll mark off where the legal boundaries are, and you can make that determination.
Got it.
But I've seen cases where like a new person moved into the neighborhood, and then wanted my client to tear down the fence that had been there for 40 years. Because he wanted an extra foot of land. Whatever. So anyways, back to the case. The house was listed on the MLS, which is, again, I say that because remember, on that MLS it says buyer to verify all information.
Yes.
And they went to a title company. So they obviously got the property report and that plat map. Okay, and they didn't do anything with it. They bought the house. Then right after they bought it, they canceled the contract. They didn't buy it. They canceled the contract because they found out about this boundary line, but after the inspection period.
Okay.
So they canceled their contract, and they had a $2,000 earnest money, and they made a demand on my client to pay the $2,000, to give the earnest money back based on cancellation of contract.
Got it.
But this was long after the due diligence period, past their appraisal. In fact, they did it. They canceled like the day of closing.
Oh my god.
They never show up and close. And I think my client did actually show up and close his side of the deal. And so he's like, no, I'm not giving them their earnest money back. Okay, and there's no reason to.
Yeah.
They were arguing that it was something he failed to disclose. Okay, and you laugh, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And again, and they got a lawyer.
Yeah.
And this went on for 3 months back and forth with this lawyer.
Wow.
Okay, he was very slow to respond. I would respond usually within a day. And
Yeah.
it would take 3 weeks to get back.
Right.
And there are a lot of bad lawyers out there, FYI.
Sure.
And so he calls up and he says, yeah, you know, I have the listing agreement. The listing doesn't say anything about this boundary thing. And my clients really wanted the house. They didn't want to cancel the contract, but they really wanted it because it's close to tracks. It was their dream home. You know, it was perfect for work, perfect for their family. But, you know, with this boundary thing, they just didn't want it anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, well, they had to, then that was their agent's fault.
Yeah.
And their fault for not hiring a surveyor, for not looking at the plat map, for not making this decision within their due diligence period. They're not getting their earnest money back.
Yeah.
And he kept, you know, I already know they're, you know, you didn't. I'm like, no, I know this.
Yeah, yeah.
it's you know, it's not something we need to disclose, and we didn't even know.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It's not relevant to the seller.
Exactly.
And it's the buyer's obligation to inspect the house and make a determination and cancel the contract or not.
Right.
And then he went, well, what about $1,000? And I said, no, I'm not. And then after about 3 months, I said, if I said, we're walking away. I'm not talking to you anymore.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
We don't owe you anything. So if I have to have one more conversation with you, I'm countersuing you.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
In other words, because under the purchase contract,
yeah,
you can recoup legal fees in litigation.
Gotcha.
Right? We weren't in mediation or anything like that, but there is some basis that if my client has to defend himself, he can recoup his legal fees.
Got it.
And so I said, we will counsel you, we'll take you to court.
Yeah.
And I will recoup my legal fees because we're tired of this.
Right.
And then his last response was, well, because I think it would go a long way if your client, my clients just kind of sat down and your client apologized. That would make them feel a lot better. And I think I had to turn my phone on mute while I laughed.
Right.
I mean, I did. I
Right.
just didn't know what to respond to this.
Right.
I mean, I do kind of get the whole idea of just, you know, the buyers knew that they were wrong and they were getting the money back, but he's trying to get them something, to make them feel better. And I was like, and then I'm like, dude, it's never gonna happen. Yeah, my client's not gonna sit in a room and waste his time where he has a very high hourly rate. To come to make your clients feel good, you know, better that they didn't hire a good enough real estate agent or a good enough inspector, and they didn't do their job. Right, right. Didn't get a survey, didn't do the due diligence in time. It's not my problem. So, anyways, that's the reason I like that story, is that ending. At the end of the day, what the attorney was really asking for was an apology for something that we never did wrong in the first place. Right, right. You can't disclose what you don't know. If you don't know, there's a... it's not the seller's job to do the surveys or anything like that. That is in Utah, that is the buyer's obligation. Right, right. So very important message. It's not the seller's job to do the due diligence for the buyer. So if you're a buyer out there and your seller doesn't disclose something because they don't know, it's not their job to go discover it. It's your job as a buyer to go discover it. Right. The seller's only job is the seller's disclosures. Yes, yes. And that's an important document. Right. And every seller should use it. Even if you're a flipper or investor and you've never lived in the home, whatever, doesn't matter. Yeah. My recommendation to everybody, retail and non-retail, is to always provide sellers disclosures. Yes. Always answer them honestly. Absolutely. If there's one where you can check no, but you can also write in, sellers never lived in the house. Yeah. Sellers unable to verify. Yeah. Buyers, it's buyer's duty to figure this out because the seller doesn't know. You can write that in. Yeah. But what that does is it moves the obligation of proof. Gotcha. Okay, and that's a big deal in law. Whose job is it? Whose duty is it? Yes. To prove somebody did something wrong. Right. And if the seller provides these disclosures, what that is it lays everything on the buyer's lap. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. It says, buyer, here's everything I know. Yeah. And even things I don't know. Right. Right? It's now your job to look at that, and if there's something that I don't know or can't confirm, it's your job to investigate it. Right, right. Very cool. How did, just out of curiosity, because if title is holding earnest money, sometimes title companies won't release earnest money unless they get from both parties, like approval from both parties. Did that affect this at all? Yeah, the title company was holding on to the money.
Okay.
Yeah, it's under Utah law,
Yeah.
and the Utah REPC, and the Utah Earnest Money Release Addendum.
Yes.
Right? It only takes one signature.
Okay.
Right? It only actually takes whoever's request, like when this buyer cancels the contract, the buyer can cancel the contract, provide notice to the seller, and then ask for their money back from the title company or broker.
Got it.
First, you should be depositing earnest money with your broker, not the title company.
Okay.
It's a much better place to put it.
Got it.
But it can be either way. So if a broker's holding on to the money, it's up to the broker to release it or not.
Okay.
Most do.
Okay.
With that signature, because the buyer's going to submit earnest money to their own agent's broker.
Right.
And then they're going to submit the cancellation to the seller, and then to the broker, they're going to say, hey, we canceled the contract within the deadline, and the broker just releases the earnest money. Title companies are a little different.
Yeah.
Because title companies are independent third parties.
Right.
And we're not, and I own a title company, REI Title.
Yes.
And we're not going to release earnest money just because one side says that they deserve it.
Right.
Either side. Doesn't matter.
Right.
Because we don't want to get in the middle of a lawsuit and release money to somebody without knowing for sure that they deserve the return of the earnest money.
Right.
And that was one of our arguments, was that, hey, the title company's sitting on our earnest money. It belongs to us now, the sellers.
Yeah.
And we won it, and it's now been 3 months, so if you don't drop this, we're going to sue you to release the earnest money.
Got it.
So when you do leave earnest money at a title company, both parties are almost certainly, and almost every title company I know does this.
Yes.
So it's pretty standard. Both the buyer and the seller will need to agree who the earnest money gets released to.
Gotcha.
And if there's a dispute, obviously one side's not going to sign.
Yeah.
And then what happens after a few months, if the parties can't decide, what most title companies will do is then submit the money to the state, unreclaimed funds pool of money. And then that's going to force the buyer and seller to actually go to court.
Got it.
And a judge will then decide. Because title companies don't want to sit on this money while you battle things out.
Right.
So be aware that, if you can't resolve it quickly and over the earnest money, eventually that title company is just going to give it to the state. And once it's at the state, it's going to require some sort of litigation to get it out.
That makes sense. To add to that little story, I learned a lesson once through a friend of mine who you know as well. And you probably know both parties, actually. He was the seller. He's a flipper. And their buyer was from Arizona, if I'm not mistaken. The title company that was holding the $4,000 earnest money check ended up returning it back to the buyer wrongfully because they'd canceled after.
And the seller got upset.
And the seller got very upset. And so the lesson I learned from there is, if I hear of a cancellation and I'm the seller, immediately I'm going to call the title company and say,
whoever's holding the earnest money.
Yeah, whoever's holding the earnest money.
Yeah,
is probably,
even if it's the other brokerage.
Exactly. And let them know that, hey, this is getting canceled. Just it's outside of that. Let's hold the earnest money. Don't give it back. But this seller was really upset because he's like, I'm never getting that earnest money back. Some guy in Arizona, got it already back in his bank account. He's not going to send it to me. And it was interesting because he, had a conversation with the potential buyer, I should say, from Arizona, and saying, hey, contractually you're supposed to send that to us. The title company was, and the guy's like, well, I don't want to send it back, know, and
that's like, come sue me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So something that you need to be aware of if you're a seller, if that ever happens to you, maybe take the extra step to call whoever's holding the earnest money.
And say, don't release it.
Exactly.
Because I'm going to challenge it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that the title company requiring both signatures, that's not law.
Gotcha.
Because again, the way the purchase contract and the addendums are done, if the buyer cancels, they can request the money back.
Yeah.
And if the buyer breaches, the seller can submit a form and request the earnest money.
Gotcha.
It's title company policy.
Got it.
It's what it's our policy, because we don't want to get involved and we don't be stuck in the middle of anything.
Right.
So we just have our own internal policy saying we're not going to do it.
Right. Exactly. Very smart.
Yeah, very smart.
You must be an attorney.
That's it.
Awesome. All right, guys, we're going to take another commercial break. We've got more stories when we come back. You're definitely not going to want to go anywhere if you're thinking about buying or selling a home. These are lessons that you would rather learn from other people than yourself. So stay tuned. Sweet. So that was Randall.
Hi, I'm
Randall.
Jesse.
And Jack Petty.
Yes, you know.
Oh, yeah.
educate children on the prevention of child abuse.
I know, that's what he told me too.
Well, and then he got really kind of
Richard Paul Evans, we were able to publish this book
because I would
as
do
a
things
tool
for free
to help
for
break
him.
the ice in an easy,
Randall's very
innocent
much.
way to help children
I only
understand
scratch your
and
back
learn
if you scratch
how
mine.
to speak
Yeah,
up
yeah,
and
yeah.
communicate.
Nice guy, really.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's kind of just his
Numerous
personality.
times
Right,
with the
right.
He likes
podcast
his little
discuss the
sycophants
importance
that are
of
always
good
sucking up
communication
children
with
to
your
get
child
fast
in
and
regards
fast.
to abuse. And
So
also
anyways,
to discuss how the book
after that happened,
Bodies
then
Just
suddenly
for
he was
Me
like
is a
Jack's
great
best
tool
friend.
for every parent
And he
when
invited
having that
Jackson
tricky
to
conversation with
Korea,
their
and he was
children.
like, oh yeah,
For
no,
more
for
information
contracts
on the
for
book,
deed
My
or
Bodies Just for
awesome,
Me,
and I
please
used them,
visit
and would never, like 6 months earlier, he wouldn't touch a contract for me.
Wow.
Today, and remember,
And then he calls me,
the more
he's
we
like,
focus on prevention,
I
the
think Jack's
less
Penny
we'll have to
violated
focus
the
on
law.
rehabilitation.
I'm like, well, probably, he does it all the time. That's his reputation in town.
Wow.
I'm gonna be right back.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just gonna leave this here.
Okay,
I'm gonna
cool.
do a seller find, a really cool seller find, so that'll be that'll take up all the time. Perfect.
All right, guys, we are back. You're listening to K-Talk Radio, 1640 AM. This is the show, Utah Home Sweet Home. Our special guest today is attorney Jeff Brailio. We're talking about war stories, and man, they've been interesting. They've definitely been interesting.
They're fun. Yeah,
Yes.
I'll have to come back. I've got plenty.
Oh, yes. I'm fascinated by this stuff. I don't know why, but I just love learning.
You love seeing people's agony and misery, and you're a sadist. And you
right. You know, if someone's going to go through that mistake, myself included, why not share it, right?
That's
Some others
right.
don't.
Yeah, I share. I mean, not only do I do, but when I teach real estate, you might,
Yeah.
here are all my mistakes.
Yeah,
Here's
yeah.
everywhere that I did something wrong.
Seriously.
You know, learn from me.
Exactly.
And you know, that's really the fun stuff about real estate. You know,
Absolutely.
especially if it's your profession.
Yes.
You know, it really is a community that's like, oh my gosh, I totally screwed the pooch on this
Yeah,
last week. You've
yeah.
got to hear this. Like,
Totally.
I just lost $50,000.
Right.
I want to tell you all about it.
Seriously.
I mean, what other industry do people gloat about losing
Right.
$50,000?
Exactly.
We're like, this is an incredible situation. You're going to learn so much.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
it's a $50,000 educational experience, but it's awesome.
Exactly. Seriously, I've shared tons of nightmare stories on this show, and I just hope other people can learn from those that have experienced what I did. You know, just real quickly here, one of my biggest nightmare stories was supposed to be the easiest fix and flip project I'd ever done. It was like something that was like, oh, this is like almost carpet and paint, like almost, right? I was like, this is going to be super easy. Didn't have a big profit margin, but I was like, yeah, you know, it was like 16,000 profit margin. I was like, for as little as I'm going to do, it's worth doing it for 16,000. I normally don't do anything for less than 20. It turned out to be the worst flip I've ever done in my life. I think I lost like 19,000 on it. Everything that could happen happened wrong on it.
Right.
And that was a nightmare story that I never want to go through again. So,
Yeah.
awesome.
Okay.
So you've got another one.
Yeah, I've got another one.
Okay.
This is in the world of seller financing.
Okay.
Seller financing is definitely a more advanced
Yep.
real estate investing technique.
Okay.
A lot of investors do it. Most do it incompetently because they don't really know what they're doing. It's actually very easy to get done,
Okay.
but it's difficult to really understand all the nuances and to solve problems and avoid issues and stuff like that.
Got it.
And so, if you're going to be involved in a seller financing transaction, in our last program, we actually talked about some keys to seller financing.
That's right.
So
and you have a seller financing class.
I have a seller finance class on September 12th.
September 12th. Where can people
You
go?
get it on our website, which is www.reimasteryu.com, and it's U like university, but it's not a university.
Yeah.
I'm legally obligated to tell you this is not a university.
Yes.
I am not associated with any kind of school.
And REI.
It's just the letter U.
Right, the letter U. And REI, just for the listeners, stands for real estate investing?
Yep.
Okay.
Real estate investing.
Okay, cool.
Mastery to become a master at real estate investing.
Yep,
So,
yep.
And just right there on the homepage, you can get access to information about the seller financing class.
Very
But
cool.
we're going to bring it up because a lot of sellers do seller financing. And sellers, when they're working with the investor may know what a seller finance transaction is. And it may be a good deal for the seller. And there's situations where seller finance is good for the seller.
Right.
Right, but the sellers aren't educated or informed.
Yeah.
And then there are a lot of buyers, retail buyers who buy seller financed transactions. Right?
Sure, yeah.
And they're relying on their agent or maybe an investor or someone in the middle to kind of help them through this.
Right.
And the buyers are not experienced in seller financing transactions.
Right.
So here's the story.
Okay.
A client bought a house from a seller with seller financing, which means he actually bought the house. It went to a closing, he got a warranty deed, he took title, he owns the house.
Yes.
But the seller helped finance his purchase. So he didn't have to go out and get a conventional loan, non-owner occupied loan, to buy the house. There was an existing mortgage on place with the house that was the seller's mortgage with the bank that they bought the house with.
Got it.
And that was going to stay in place. It's called subject to.
Okay.
Which is completely legal. You can do that.
Yeah.
And then there was what we call an AIT or TD, or all-inclusive note and deed.
Okay.
Or wrap note and deed.
Got it.
Where the rest of the purchase price, so let's the numbers don't matter, but let's say the purchase price was $200,000.
Okay.
There's an underlying mortgage the sellers have that's at $150,000 balance.
Okay.
Right? So the sellers want $25,000 down.
Sure.
That's cash at closing.
Yep.
That leaves $175,000 owing to the sellers.
Right.
Right? Now, of that $175,000, $150,000 would need to go to the bank.
Sure.
To pay off the mortgage.
Sure.
But since that mortgage is staying in place, the sellers can actually become lenders.
Right.
And the sellers actually give a mortgage to the buyer for the $175,000. And that $175,000 mortgage is subject to the $150,000.
Got it.
So it's not doubling up or anything. There's just there's sort of one's wrapped around the other.
Gotcha.
And so the buyer owes the seller $175,000, and he's making payments on that. And that's got its own interest rate, its own amortization schedule, its own monthly payment, etc., just like any other mortgage.
Right.
And let's say that payment was $1,000.
Yeah.
So that $1,000 goes to the sellers, and then the sellers turn around and use some of that money to pay the monthly payment on the underlying mortgage.
Right.
So let's say that's $750.
Yeah.
And the sellers net $250 a month cash flow.
Yeah.
That's great for sellers.
Absolutely.
Right? Not only do they got their $25,000 down because they're helping finance some of the purchase, they're now lenders making interest and they're making more money.
Yep.
So the sellers are happy. And so he buys the house under this sort of all-inclusive note and deed, this wrap, and the underlying mortgage stays in place. So there's 2 mortgages on the house right now.
Got it.
He then actually fixes it up, kind of painting carpets, spruces it up, and then he turns around and sells it to a retail buyer to people who want to live in the house.
Yeah.
And he sells it for $225,000.
Gotcha.
Okay. So he sells the house. He gets a down payment for them of like $10,000.
Yeah.
And then he gives them a mortgage for, and that would be $215,000.
Yes.
So his buyers move in.
Yes.
They own the house.
Okay.
They're making the mortgage payment to him on the $215,000 loan.
Okay.
He's taking some of that monthly payment. He's paying the sellers on his wrap mortgage.
Yes.
And then the sellers are using his payment to pay their underlying mortgage.
Gotcha.
There's basically 3 mortgages on the house.
Yes.
Retail buyers to investor.
Yes.
Investor to seller. Seller to bank.
Got it.
Okay. Now that's a lot of transactional processing, checks and stuff.
Yeah.
So they used an escrow company. There are escrow companies out there who will facilitate and act as a kind of a loan servicer on these things.
Yes.
So everything was set up with this escrow company. The escrow company received the monthly check from the buyers.
Okay.
Totally fine. They made every payment on time.
Yes.
Right? Then what happened was, and for the first year and a half, the escrow company then paid my client his little extra.
Yeah.
They paid the sellers their little extra.
Yeah.
And then they made the payment to the underlying mortgage bank. So they kind of split up the money and gave it to all the parties.
Got it.
And it worked fine for about 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
Then for some reason the escrow company stopped making the payments to the underlying mortgage.
Oh, no.
So they received the money.
Yeah.
They had the money to pay everybody.
Yeah.
But for some reason they just stopped.
Wow.
Whether they forgot, they said they had instructions from my client telling them to stop making payments, which of course never happened.
Yeah.
So they stopped making payments. Nobody caught this for about 6 months.
Oh no.
And the reason it got caught was because no one was making payments to the mortgage bank.
So notice of default.
So there's a notice of default. When the bank put the notice of default on, they saw the house had sold.
Got it.
So not only was there a notice of default saying the mortgage is in default, and which if in default, you can bring it current.
Yeah.
Right. When a house mortgage goes into default, you usually have at least 90 days.
Yeah.
To bring get caught up and pull it out of default and go on.
Yeah.
But because when they started the foreclosure process, they saw that the house had also sold. They called in the due on sale clause and said, we're not foreclosing based on default of the mortgage.
Yeah.
We want you to pay the note in full in 30 days, or we're going to foreclose on that, which does not give anybody the ability to bring it current.
Right.
And the bank was not interested in it being brought current.
Right.
So there's no hope of bringing it current anymore.
Oh, no.
So now you got a situation where the seller's credit score has been dinged because there's 6 months of late payments.
Oh my gosh.
You've got, and they're very angry.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
You got the retail buyers who've been making payments on a house they're living in.
Yeah.
That suddenly they were at risk of losing.
Yeah.
And my client, the investor, sitting in the middle.
Right.
Being sued by the sellers and his buyers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When this was all the escrow company's fault.
Right.
The lucky part of the story is the bank foreclosure was a local bank. The retail buyers, they weren't ready to buy yet.
Got it.
And that's why they were really upset.
Right.
You know, they had a couple more years to refinance the house.
Yes.
They were repairing credit and building up some down payment and stuff like that.
Right.
And so, but they were able to finally actually get a loan because they didn't want to lose the house.
Got it.
So they were able to get a loan, which then, when they got a loan, it did cash kind of everybody out and clean everything up.
Got it.
But you saw a situation with the sellers.
Yeah.
You know, the credit score was damaged.
Right.
And, you know, and so there was a lawsuit and he ended up paying damages to the sellers.
Got it.
And then he sued the escrow company and that settled and got kind of paid back. At the end of the day, he did end up, I think, making some money on it, but not a lot.
Got it, yeah.
And the kind of the moral of the story is, one, you know, if you're a retail seller or buyer in a seller finance transaction, you should really have your own legal counsel.
Yeah.
Don't rely on your real estate agent. Don't rely on the investor that might be, you know, selling a house or anybody else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Your title company, your real estate agent, your specialist. These people aren't going to know how these things are structured and dealt with. Every buyer and seller in a seller finance transaction, I really should have a lawyer at least go, okay, here's how this works.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And here's what you need. And here's what you need to do moving forward so that everything stays good.
Right.
You know, I had my client kept track. You know, he looked. Go online and look at the mortgage. And if after 1 month it wasn't paid, he could have jumped in and probably saved everything.
Right.
You know, but we rely on third parties. We rely on other people.
For
their expertise. And you know, if this is your house. As a buyer or seller or investor, this is your asset, it's your value, it's your home. You need to take responsibility.
Exactly.
And yes, hire qualified people, do your own due diligence. If you have questions, run them by legal counsel, run them by your CPA or accounting professional because another thing with seller financing is these sellers that finance part of the purchase price and they're making this interest, right?
Yep.
That's taxable income.
Right.
And they may not realize that.
Right.
They might, oh cool, I'm getting this extra $200 every month.
Right.
But it's income and they have to claim it. If they don't claim it and it's an audit, then the auditors are going to look at the buyer. Yeah. Who's claiming that as an interest deduction.
Right. Right.
And now they're in an audit. So, you know, not understanding these transactions is very, very risky.
Got it. Yes.
And so be very careful and, you know, make sure your own counsel and legal advice from your own professionals.
Yes. And that had a lot of pieces to the puzzle.
Oh, a lot of pieces. Yes. And there's actually more. There was actually a solar panel lien.
Oh.
And that's a big, you know, a lot of people are putting solar panels on their homes.
Yeah.
Right? And they're essentially borrowing the money.
Right.
To buy and install the solar panels, and the solar company puts a lien on the property.
Got it.
And then 3 years later, the sellers decide to sell the house. And they don't realize that lien is going to affect their new buyers. Because it's a lien. You can't get rid of it unless you pay it off in full.
Right.
And so that's becoming an issue that I think people should be aware of.
Right.
But there was the first mortgage, there was this solar panel lien. So there were actually two liens, and my client wrapped both of those.
Got it.
Then his wrap was a third. He then had a rehab loan, which was technically in fourth place.
Got it.
So that was a fourth loan. And then the all-inclusive loan to the retail buyer. So there's technically 5.
Wow.
Technically 5.
Wow.
But the ones that I explained in the example, the underlying mortgage, that was the important one. Because if the sellers aren't getting paid, they're not going to go report to credit bureaus.
Right.
They might get mad and say, hey, what's going on? Why aren't we getting our money?
Yeah.
But they're not going to cause any problems beyond that.
Exactly.
But when that underlying mortgage didn't get paid, now you've got a foreclosure and a due on sale clause in the bank coming after the property. And that you can't stop.
Yeah. Wow, that's insane. And simple for those listeners out there who are, maybe in this situation, in that, not this exact situation, but in the situation that you are buying or selling a seller finance transaction, maybe you've already bought or sold a seller transaction, you haven't refinanced out of it yet, and you're wondering, oh my gosh, how do I make sure that the payment I'm making is getting paid? You can typically log online. Just go and check whether it's the mortgager's website, Zions Bank directly, Citi, Bank of America, Citibank, whoever it might be. You can go online. The seller could set up a username and password for you, and you can go check to see that it's getting paid. Whether you're making the payment directly to the seller, which I don't recommend, I would make it to the escrow company, like Jeff is talking about, a third party, to make sure it's getting paid. Well, to make sure it's getting paid. In this case, it didn't. But you can make sure that they're getting, paying it. But it's nice to give it to a third party versus directly to the seller. I have seen where people have given it directly to the seller, and then the seller stopped making payments and kept all the money, and then got foreclosed.
Yeah.
And then the buyer lost the house because the
seller's gone.
Yeah, seller's gone. So that's why this particular investor that Jeff shared used an escrow company. Unfortunately, there was just that little hiccup.
Yeah, and mistakes happen.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I don't think there's anything nefarious, and it wasn't.
Yeah,
it was just somehow some probably box got unchecked.
Yeah,
that stopped the payments from being made.
Exactly.
Somehow. And so, but yeah, it is you. These are your assets. A house is is for most Americans. Their only asset.
Exactly.
It's certainly their biggest asset.
Absolutely.
And for many, it's their retirement.
It's
how they're going to live in their golden years. And so these are things that you need to pay attention to.
Wonderful.
And need to protect and use good people and hire good people and rely on professionals. And at the end of the day, you keep an eye on things.
Yes. Well, Jeff, we are at the end of our show. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing legal war stories.
Yes. You got to come up with a better name. Well, next time we'll have a better name for that.
Awesome. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the show today, and I hope everybody has a spectacular rest of the weekend.